Okay, let's get started. Let me introduce one of the greatest economists and world-renowned economists who sits close to me, Edward Altman, a professor of finance emeritus at New York University Stern School of Business, and he is the father of Altman Z-score model that is a multivariate formula for the measurement of the financial health of a company. Welcome, Edward. I would like, it's my pleasure to meet. How close are we to a credit bubble? Is the financial system more solid and resilient to a possible shock than in the past?
Well, I don't think we're that close, even though there are some warning signs and the clouds are forming. I would say that the biggest problem now is the global debt situation, and therefore it's not when we have the crisis, but if we have a crisis, what will be the impact of that crisis. Probably we will remain in a benign cycle, meaning low default rates, high recovery rates if there is default, low interest rates, and high liquidity, probably for at least another 1 year. After that, I think there is an increasing probability of problems, mainly because we are more vulnerable at that point to a financial downturn and an economic downturn, particularly either in the US or China. If we have the downturn, and with our significant amount of debt outstanding in the global situation as well as domestically in many countries, then the impact of the downturn could be catastrophic in terms of the amount of problems because of the high debt levels.
Thank you for your answers. I move to the second question. What do you think of the leverage of the banks, and is this adequate?
Well, the leverage of the banks happens to be one of the better situations globally and in Europe as well, because of the crisis, which hit the banks very hard in 2008-9, the regulators have been very firm with relying on higher capital ratios and forcing
capital requirements.
Capital requirements, and also instituting more and better risk measures. So I don't think the biggest problem is with the banks, at least in terms of their capital. Banks, however, have another issue, and that is their ability to tap the financial markets, as some of the speakers spoke about today at our conference. This is, of course, much more difficult in places like Europe and Asia than it is in the US, where the capital markets are more developed. Also, banks have improved their risk management systems, particularly at the board level. The board of directors, which is more of a governance issue, is much more sensitive to risk than they were in the past crisis. I see the biggest problems, however, are in the household sector in some countries, like Scandinavia and a few others, and also in the corporate sector throughout the world, because of the low interest rates and the quest for yield.
The final question. With regard to the European situation, and in particular the Italian one, did you make a specific assessment to estimate the sovereign default risk in Europe?
For the corporates?
For the corporates?
Well, we are building models now. We are particularly interested in the small and medium-sized firm sector, not for the overall corporate sector. And what I can tell you is this sector is critical for the growth of the EU, Europe in general, and also an area that needs a market discipline, where investors have a good way of measuring the risk as well as the promised return. If this happens, this market could develop from a very low level like the mini bond market in Italy,
Yeah.
and similar markets elsewhere. The Nordics have a similar market, to a very meaningful one. If we have, however, lack of a credit culture, then this market won't grow, and the banks not able to support this market either. This could be a big problem for Europe.
Thank you, Professor Altman, for your availability and the suggestion you have raised and the comments and the solution you have raised during the conversation. That's all, everything from the Risk Banking and Finance Society.
I'm happy to be involved.
Thank you,
Ciao.
Professor. Ciao.